Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, The Accountant's Mask. Frank Morrison adjusted his reading glasses and stared at the spreadsheet glowing on his laptop screen. Numbers, columns, tax codes, the mundane armor he'd worn for 12 years. To everyone in Riverside Heights, he was just another suburban accountant who drove a sensible Honda and complained about property taxes at neighborhood barbecues. But beneath the polyester shirts and pocket protectors lived a ghost. Langley had called him the Shadow during his 15-year tenure with the CIA's Special Activities Division. He'd infiltrated terrorist cells in Kandahar, eliminated targets in Belgrade, and vanished into crowds like smoke. Then came a mission in Tehran that went sideways. 3 good agents dead because of faulty intelligence. Frank had extracted himself and disappeared into civilian life, carrying scars no one could see. He'd met Diana Kellerman at a coffee shop near George Washington University, where she was finishing her psychology degree. Beautiful, ambitious, with eyes that seemed to hold secrets. She claimed her parents died in a car crash when she was 20, leaving her alone in the world. Frank, tired of shadows and death, saw salvation in her vulnerability. Their wedding was small. Diana insisted on keeping it quiet. Just close friends, she'd said. Frank didn't question why none of her family attended. Love made him careless, and carelessness was a luxury he couldn't afford. Now, 12 years later, Frank sat in his home office listening to his wife's voice drift up from the kitchen below. She was on another late-night call, speaking in hushed tones. Lately, these calls have become frequent. The timing has to be perfect, Diana's voice carried through the heating vent. The Iranian sleeper cells will make it look like a car bomb. Then we split his $5 million life insurance policy. Frank's hand froze over the keyboard. The coffee mug beside him, decorated with world's best dad from their daughter Chloe, suddenly felt like a lead weight. Iranian sleeper cells. Life insurance. His life insurance. Every instinct honed by years of tradecraft screamed to life. Frank closed his laptop with surgical precision and moved to the window. Diana stood in the kitchen below. Phone pressed her ear, her free hand gesturing animatedly. The woman he'd shared a bed with for over a decade was planning his murder. He thought of 15-year-old Chloe, probably texting friends in her room, unaware her mother was orchestrating patricide. Or was she? In Frank's world, family meant nothing when survival was at stake. Trust was a commodity he could no longer afford. Diana hung up, and Frank watched her reflection in the kitchen window. No tears, no guilt, just the satisfied expression of someone who just completed a business transaction. She pulled out a bottle of wine and poured herself a generous glass, toasting her own reflection. Frank backed away from the window and opened his laptop again. But instead of spreadsheets, he accessed a partition hidden behind layers of encryption. Inside were the tools of his former life. Contact lists, safe house locations, weapon caches, and identities he'd maintained for emergencies. The Shadow was awake. Chapter 2, The Investigation. Frank arrived at his office the next morning carrying the same leather briefcase he'd used for years, but inside, beneath the tax forms and calculators, lay a Glock 19 and surveillance equipment worth more than most people's cars. Morrison and Associates Accounting occupied a modest suite above a sandwich shop. The perfect cover for a man who needed to appear ordinary while conducting extraordinary business. His secretary, Mrs. Patterson, greeted him with her usual efficiency. Your 9 a.m. appointment called to reschedule, and your wife phoned about dinner plans. What did she say exactly? Frank asked, hanging his coat with practiced calm. Something about trying that new Persian restaurant downtown. Said she had a surprise for you. Persian. The pieces were falling into place with chilling clarity. Once alone, Frank activated the white noise generator he'd disguised as a radio and began his investigation. Diana Morrison, birth name Diana Kellerman, had arrived in the United States 18 years ago on a student visa. Her backstory checked out on the surface, but Frank knew how to dig deeper. The car crash that killed her parents? It happened, but the victims were Harold and Margaret Kellerman from Tucson, Arizona. No children listed. Diana had stolen a dead girl's identity. Next, he traced her financial records. The psychology degree was real, but she'd never practiced. Instead, she'd received monthly payments from a consulting firm called Meridian Strategic Solutions. Frank ran the company through his databases. It was a front for the SVR, Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service. His wife was a Russian operative. Frank leaned back in his chair, processing the revelation. For 12 years, he'd been married to the enemy. Diana had played the long game, infiltrating his life, bearing his child, waiting for the perfect moment to eliminate him. But why now? He pulled up classified briefings he still had access to through carefully maintained back channels. 3 months ago, the CIA had begun Operation Nightfall, a deep-cover mission to identify and neutralize a Russian spy network operating on the East Coast. Frank wasn't officially involved, but Langley would want to debrief anyone who'd been married to a Russian asset for over a decade. Diana knew he was a former CIA operative. She had to, which meant everything. Their meeting, their marriage, Chloe's birth had been orchestrated. The question was, how much did their daughter know? Frank's secure phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Persian restaurant. Table 12. Come alone. D. He smiled grimly. Diana was accelerating her timeline. Good. Frank preferred his enemy's impatient. At 5 p.m., Frank drove to Shiraz Palace, an upscale Persian restaurant in downtown Richmond. He'd changed into a simple gray suit and carried a newspaper, the picture of suburban normalcy. But beneath his jacket, the Glock waited, and in his ear, a nearly invisible device recorded everything. Diana sat at table 12, wearing a black dress that accentuated her figure. She looked up as he approached, and Frank saw something new in her eyes, predatory anticipation. You look tense, honey, she said, gesturing for him to sit. Hard day with the numbers. The usual. Frank studied the menu, noting the restaurant's layout, exits, and potential threats. This is nice. What's the occasion? Can't a wife surprise her husband? Diana sipped her wine. I've been thinking about us lately. About changes. What kind of changes? Before Diana could answer, a man approached their table. Tall, dark hair, expensive suit, with the posture of someone accustomed to violence. Frank recognized the type, muscle with brains. Diana, darling. The man bent to kiss her cheek, his hand lingering on her shoulder. You must be Frank. I'm Tony Vasquez, Diana's business partner. Frank stood, offering his hand. Tony's grip was firm, testing. Business partner? Diana never mentioned. International consulting, Diana interrupted smoothly. Tony helps with overseas clients. Tony sat without invitation, signaling the waiter. Frank, Diana's told me so much about you. The quiet accountant who keeps everyone's secrets safe. The emphasis on secrets wasn't lost on Frank. This was a probing session, testing how much he knew, how much he suspected. Tony wasn't just muscle. He was Diana's handler. As the evening progressed, Frank played his role perfectly. The boring suburban husband, slightly uncomfortable with his wife's worldly colleague, asking harmless questions about their business. But he was cataloging everything. Tony's watch Omega Seamaster, favored by intelligence operatives, the slight bulge under his left armpit shoulder holster, the way he scanned the room every few minutes, operational awareness. When they parted ways, Diana kissed Frank's cheek and whispered, See you at home, darling. We need to talk. Frank drove home through surface streets, checking for surveillance. Clean, but as he pulled into his driveway, he noticed Chloe's bedroom light was off. His daughter never went to bed before midnight on weekends. Inside, Diana waited in the living room with 2 glasses of wine. Sit, she said, patting the couch beside her. Let's talk about our future. Frank sat, accepting the wine, but not drinking. What's on your mind? Honesty. Diana's mask slipped slightly. I know you've been investigating me, Frank. Or should I call you Shadow? The game was over. Chapter 3, The Reveal. Frank set down his wine glass with deliberate calm. I'm not sure what you mean. Diana laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. Please, did you really think I wouldn't notice? The extra time at the office, the the questions about my past, the way you've been watching me. She stood, moving to the mantel where their wedding photos sat. 15 years with the CIA's Special Activities Division. 17 confirmed kills. The Tehran incident that made you disappear. Where's Chloe? Frank's voice carried a dangerous edge. Safe. For now. Diana turned, and Frank saw the woman he'd really married. Cold, calculating, lethal. She's with friends. This conversation is just between us. And Tony, my handler, yes. SVR has been planning this operation for 20 years. Find a burned American intelligence asset. Place an operative close to him. Create a life that makes him soft and complacent. Diana poured herself more wine. You were the perfect target, Frank. Traumatized, isolated, desperate for connection. Frank remained seated, hands folded. And our daughter? A happy accident that made the cover more convincing. Diana's casual dismissal of Chloe hit Frank like a physical blow. Though she's proven useful in other ways. Explain. Chloe isn't with friends, Frank. She's been recruited. 15 years old and already showing remarkable aptitude for the family business. Diana smiled. She's been reporting on you for 2 years. Every conversation, every habit, every weakness. The betrayal cut deeper than anything Frank had experienced in war. His own daughter, trained to spy on him, to help orchestrate his murder. But he kept his expression neutral, a skill that had kept him alive in hostile territory. The insurance policy? He asked. $5 million, split between your grieving widow and her business partner. But that's just the bonus. The real prize is Operation Nightfall. Your former colleagues think they're hunting Russian assets, but they're walking into a trap. Every agent they've assigned to the operation is already compromised. Frank processed this information. Diana wasn't just eliminating him. She was delivering a devastating blow to American intelligence operations. Dozens of agents would die. The Iranian sleeper cells you mentioned? A lovely touch, don't you think? Your death will be blamed on foreign terrorists, deflecting suspicion from the real perpetrators. Tony has contacts in several Middle Eastern organizations who owe favors. Diana moved closer, settling onto the coffee table directly in front of Frank. But here's what's really beautiful about this operation. You're going to help us. I don't think so. Oh, but you are. Diana produced a tablet, swiping to a video feed. Chloe sat in what appeared to be a basement, zip-tied to a chair. 2 armed men flanked her. 1 phone call, and your daughter dies. Badly. Tony has very specific tastes when it comes to interrogation. Frank felt the familiar coldness settle over him. The same emotional shutdown that had made him effective in the field. Personal feelings were a luxury he couldn't afford. Not when lives were at stake. What do you want? Tomorrow night, you're going to meet with Gregory Mitchell from the agency. He'll want to debrief you about your marriage to a Russian operative. You're going to give him a list of names, every deep cover asset you can remember from your time with the company. He'll trust you because you're the victim, the betrayed husband seeking redemption. Frank nodded slowly. And then you'll drive to the safe house where Mitchell's team is coordinating Operation Nightfall. You'll deliver this. Diana produced a briefcase from behind the couch. Inside is a device that will upload a virus to their secure network. It will feed us real-time intelligence on every anti-Russian operation the CIA is running. After that, you die in a tragic car bombing orchestrated by Iranian terrorists. I collect the insurance money and disappear with Tony. Chloe, well, that depends on how cooperative you are. Frank stood, moving to the window. Outside, their suburban street looked peaceful. Porch lights glowing, newspapers waiting on doorsteps, the American dream on display. But underneath, predators hunted. I need to think about this, he said. You have until tomorrow morning. If you try to run, if you contact anyone from your old life, if you do anything except exactly what I've told you, Chloe dies. Understood. Frank turned from the window. Understood. Diana kissed his cheek. The same gesture she'd made thousands of times during their marriage. Good boy. I'm going out for a while. Use the time to make peace with your choices. After she left, Frank sat in the darkness of his living room, thinking. Diana had made one crucial mistake in her revelation. She'd underestimated who she was dealing with. The shadow hadn't died in Tehran. He'd simply been sleeping. Now he was awake, and everyone who'd betrayed him would pay. Chapter 4. The Countergame. Frank waited 2 hours after Diana left before moving. He went to his study and removed several books from the shelf, revealing a hidden panel. Inside were items from his former life, fake IDs, encrypted phones, cash, and most importantly, a secure communication device that would let him contact his former handler without going through official channels. But first, he needed to locate Chloe. Frank had installed tracking devices in all the family vehicles years ago, a precaution from his paranoid past that now proved invaluable. Chloe's phone showed her last location as the Miller house 3 blocks away, where she often studied with her friend Amy. But the tracker in Diana's BMW showed a very different story. The car had traveled to an industrial area near the James River, perfect for the kind of off-the-books facility where someone might hold a hostage. Frank memorized the location, then activated his secure communicator. Blackbird came the voice after several encryption protocols engaged. This is Shadow. I need an immediate callback on the Tehran protocols. A pause. Shadow's been dark for 12 years. Authentication required. Frank provided a series of codes that proved his identity. Within minutes, Gregory Mitchell, his former CIA handler, was on the line. Jesus Christ, Frank. We heard rumors you were dead. Not yet, but there's a problem. Major problem. Frank quickly outlined Diana's true identity, the planned assassination, and the trap being set for Operation Nightfall. Son of a bitch, Mitchell breathed. We'll have an extraction team to you in. Negative. They have my daughter. I need this handled quietly, and I need resources. What kind of resources? The kind that don't officially exist. Mitchell was quiet for a long moment. There's a storage unit in Mechanicsville. Unit 247. Everything you need is there. But Frank, if this goes sideways, the agency will disavow any involvement. Understood. One more thing. I need you to feed specific information to your Operation Nightfall team. Make them think they're being compromised through a different vector. I need Diana to believe her plan is working. After disconnecting, Frank drove to the storage unit. Inside, wrapped in plastic and oilcloth, waited the tools of his former trade. Weapons, surveillance equipment, explosives, and most importantly, items that could make this look like anything other than CIA involvement. He spent the next 3 hours in reconnaissance. The building where Chloe was being held was a defunct textile warehouse surrounded by empty lots. 3 guards outside. Thermal imaging showed at least 2 more inside. Professional setup, but not impregnable. Frank positioned micro cameras around the perimeter and returned home before dawn. Diana's car was in the driveway, and lights showed under her bedroom door. She was probably reporting to Moscow, updating them on the operation's progress. At 7 a.m., she emerged from the bedroom, dressed for work. Sleep well? She asked with mock concern. Fine. I've made my decision. And I'll do what you want. But I want to see Chloe first. Proof of life. Diana nodded, producing her phone. The video showed Chloe in the same chair, but now she looked directly at the camera. Dad, I'm scared. Please just do what they want. But Frank heard something else in his daughter's voice, a subtle emphasis on certain words. Chloe was using a code he'd taught her years ago during what she thought were silly games. She was telling him she understood the situation and was ready to act when the time came. His daughter might have been reporting on him, but she hadn't been fully turned. There was still hope. The meet with Mitchell is set for 8 p.m., Frank said. Pier 7 at the marina. Good. And remember, one wrong move, one attempt to signal for help, and Chloe dies. After Diana left for her supposed job at a non-existent consulting firm, Frank began his preparation. This wouldn't just be a rescue mission. It would be the complete destruction of everyone who'd betrayed him. He started with Tony Vasquez. Chapter 5. The Hunt Begins. Frank had learned patience in the mountains of Afghanistan, but today it served him well in suburban Richmond. Tony Vasquez lived in a luxury apartment complex downtown, the kind of place that catered to young professionals with expensive tastes and flexible morals. Through careful surveillance, Frank mapped Tony's routine. The man was good, varied his routes, checked for tails, maintained operational security. But he had two weaknesses: an addiction to high-stakes poker games and a taste for expensive escorts. Every Tuesday, Tony visited a private game run by a man named Dmitry Volkov out of a penthouse in the financial district. Frank had encountered Volkov during his CIA years, a Russian national who laundered money for various intelligence services while maintaining the facade of a legitimate businessman. This Tuesday will be different. Frank positioned himself in the building's parking garage at 10 p.m., watching Tony's silver Porsche arrive. The Russian operative looked confident, carrying a briefcase full of what was probably agency money meant to fund their operation. Frank waited until Tony was in the elevator before making his move. He disabled the security cameras 20 minutes earlier using techniques learned at Langley, and the building's concierge was currently unconscious in a supply closet. The poker game was on the 15th floor. Frank took the stairs, arriving at the service entrance as Tony was settling in for what he thought would be a profitable evening. Through the kitchen service window, Frank could see 5 men around a green felt table: Tony, Volkov, and 3 others he didn't recognize. All armed, all dangerous, all focused on their cards and the substantial pile of cash in the center of the table. Frank had brought gifts for the occasion. The first flashbang grenade went off in the living room, followed immediately by 2 more in the kitchen and bedroom. In the chaos that followed, men shouting, furniture overturning, weapons being drawn blindly, Frank moved through the apartment like smoke. Tony was his primary target, but Frank couldn't leave witnesses. The other players learned too late that their Tuesday poker game had become their last game. When the smoke cleared, Frank stood over Tony's bleeding form. The Russian operative had taken a non-fatal shot to the shoulder and leg, careful placement that would keep him conscious and talking. "Where is my daughter?" Frank asked in fluent Russian, pressing the barrel of his Glock against Tony's kneecap. "Go to hell," Tony gasped. Frank pulled the trigger. Tony's scream echoed through the penthouse. "I have all night," Frank said conversationally. "And I learned interrogation techniques from people who made the KGB look like Sunday school teachers." "Where's Chloe?" It took 40 minutes, but Tony eventually gave up the location, confirming what Frank already knew, plus something more valuable: the full scope of the operation. Diana wasn't just eliminating Frank and compromising Operation Nightfall. She was the advanced scout for a larger SVR operation called Red Winter, designed to eliminate every burned Russian asset living in America while simultaneously destroying the CIA's counterintelligence capabilities. Frank was the proof of concept. If they could successfully eliminate a former CIA operative while compromising an active operation, they would roll out the strategy nationwide. Dozens of former Russian assets who defected would die, along with hundreds of American intelligence officers. Before leaving, Frank placed a small device in Tony's pocket, a tracker that would also serve another purpose when the time came. By midnight, he was positioned outside the warehouse where Chloe was being held. The thermal imaging showed the guards had relaxed their vigilance, probably assuming their boss was enjoying his poker game. Frank's assault began at 12:47 a.m. Chapter 6: Blood and Shadows. The warehouse erupted in controlled violence as Frank moved through it like a force of nature. 15 years of retirement hadn't dulled his skills, they'd refined them. Where younger operatives relied on speed and aggression, Frank used precision and patience. The first guard died without knowing Frank was there, a knife between his ribs, finding his heart. The second managed to turn before Frank's hands broke his neck. By the time the third guard realized something was wrong, Frank was already inside the building. 2 more guards waited in the main floor, but they were watching the wrong directions. Frank had entered through the loading dock, using shadows and industrial equipment as cover. The first went down to a silenced pistol shot, the second to a garrote that Frank had carried since his agency days. Chloe was being held in a basement office, and Frank could hear voices as he approached. His daughter was talking to someone, not pleading or crying, but carrying on what sounded like a normal conversation. Through a crack in the door, Frank saw something that made his blood freeze. Chloe sat unrestrained in a chair across from a man Frank didn't recognize. But what stopped him was the tone of their conversation. Familiar, comfortable, like old friends catching up. Thinks he's so smart, Chloe was saying. But he's been predictable his whole life. Mom figured out his patterns years ago. The man chuckled. And you're sure he'll come for you? Of course. He's sentimental about family. It's his biggest weakness. Frank felt something cold settle in his chest. His daughter, his 15-year-old daughter, was discussing his weaknesses with his enemies. Not under duress, not to save her own life, but as a willing participant. When this is over, the man continued, you'll come with us to Moscow. Complete your training. Your mother says you have natural talent. I can't wait. This suburban life has been so boring. Frank had heard enough. He kicked in the door and put 2 bullets in the man's chest before he could draw his weapon. Chloe didn't scream or show surprise. She just sat there, watching her father with eyes that looked suddenly much older than 15. Hello, Dad, she said calmly. Hello, Chloe. Frank kept his gun trained on her. How long? Since I was 12. That's when Mom told me the truth about what we were doing here. Chloe stood slowly, hands visible. I've been learning Russian tradecraft surveillance techniques. I'm actually quite good at it. They're reporting on me, every detail, your habits, your reactions, your emotional triggers. You're very predictable, Dad. Mom always said that would be your downfall. Frank studied his daughter's face, looking for some sign of the little girl who used to fall asleep in his lap during movie nights. But that child was gone, replaced by something foreign and dangerous. The code you used in the video, he said. Chloe smiled. What code? I was just telling you to do what they wanted. Which, apparently, you haven't done. Frank's phone buzzed. A text from Diana. Tick-tock, honey. Mitchell is waiting at the pier. He looked at his daughter, this stranger wearing his child's face, and made a decision that would have destroyed the man he used to be. You're coming with me, he said. I don't think so. Chloe produced a small pistol from behind the chair. Mom taught me to always have a backup plan. The training was evident, proper grip, steady aim, finger on the trigger. But she made one mistake. She was standing too close. Frank moved faster than she could react, disarming her and securing her hands behind her back with zip ties. Chloe finally showed emotion, rage at being outmaneuvered. You can't stop this, she spat. Even if you kill Mom and Tony, there are others. Red Winter is already in motion. We'll see about that. Frank marched his daughter out of the warehouse, leaving behind 5 dead bodies and a burning building. He had one more stop to make before his meeting with Mitchell. Chapter 7. The Pier. Gregory Mitchell stood at the end of Pier 7, watching boats bob in the dark water of the James River. At 53, he looked every day of his age, gray hair, lined face, the weary bearing of a man who'd spent 30 years fighting shadows. He'd been Frank's handler during the worst years, the ones that ended in Tehran with 3 good agents dead and Frank Morrison disappearing into suburban anonymity. Now Frank was back, and Mitchell wasn't sure if that was good news or catastrophic. The sound of footsteps on wooden planks announced Frank's arrival. Mitchell turned, expecting to see his former agent alone. Instead, Frank approached with a teenage girl whose hands were zip-tied behind her back. Jesus, Frank, please tell me you didn't. My daughter, Frank said simply. 15 years old and already a fully trained SVR operative. They recruited her when she was 12. Mitchell stared at the girl. She looked like any suburban teenager, blonde hair, designer jeans, the kind of kid you'd see at a shopping mall. But her eyes held a coldness that Mitchell recognized from interrogation rooms in places that didn't officially exist. Where's Diana? Mitchell asked, still playing her role. She thinks I'm here to betray Operation Nightfall. Frank handed Mitchell a briefcase. This contains the virus they wanted me to plant in your network. I modified it slightly. Mitchell opened the case, revealing a sophisticated electronic device. Modified how? Instead of giving them access to your systems, it will feed them false information while tracking their entire network. Every SVR operative involved in Red Winter will be exposed. Red Winter? Frank quickly outlined what he'd learned from Tony and Chloe. By the time he finished, Mitchell's face had gone pale. Hundreds of assets, Mitchell whispered. They could roll up our entire Eastern European network. Not if we stop them tonight. Frank checked his watch. Diana expects me back in 2 hours. I need you to stage my death. Come again. Car bomb. Iranian terrorists. Make it convincing. Diana needs to believe she's won, so she'll make contact with her handlers. When she does, we follow the trail all the way to Moscow, if necessary. Mitchell looked at the teenage girl. What about her? Chloe is going to help us, Frank said. When his daughter started to protest, he continued, because the alternative is a federal prison for treason. She's 15, so she might get out when she's 40. Chloe's composure finally cracked. You wouldn't. Try me. Frank's voice carried the coldness that had once terrified enemies in a dozen countries. You helped plan my murder. You betrayed your own country. I don't care if you're my daughter. You're an enemy combatant now. Mitchell intervened. Frank, she's just a kid. She's a trained operative who's been gathering intelligence on American targets for 3 years. Frank turned back to Chloe. Here's the deal. You help us roll up Red Winter, and maybe, there's a path back to a normal life. You refuse, and you spend the rest of your youth in a federal facility. Chloe looked between her father and Mitchell, calculating odds. Finally, she nodded. Good. Here's what's going to happen. Chapter 8, The Trap. Diana Morrison sat in her BMW outside the Richmond Marina, watching emergency vehicles respond to the spectacular car explosion that had occurred 20 minutes earlier. The fireball had been visible from 2 miles away, exactly the kind of dramatic statement that Iranian terrorists favored. Her phone rang. Tony's number. It's done, came Tony's voice, slightly distorted by what sounded like pain medication. Motherfucker put up more of a fight than expected, but he's crispy now. Injuries? Diana asked, noting the strain in Tony's voice. Nothing serious. Had to get creative with the interrogation, but he gave us what we needed before the end. Diana smiled. And the device? Planted in Mitchell's network. We should have full access within the hour. Perfect. Phase 1 of Red Winter was complete. Meet me at the safe house, Diana said. We need to coordinate the next phase. She drove through Richmond's quiet streets, thinking about Moscow's reaction when they learned of the operation's success. The elimination of a former CIA operative, the compromise of an active counterintelligence operation, and the recruitment of valuable assets, all accomplished while maintaining perfect cover. The safe house was a colonial-style home in a middle-class neighborhood, the kind of place that attracted no attention. Diana parked in the attached garage and entered through the kitchen, expecting to find Tony waiting with champagne and congratulations. Instead, she found her husband sitting at the kitchen table, very much alive and pointing a gun at her chest. Hello, darling, Frank said calmly. We need to talk. Diana's hand moved toward her purse, but stopped when she saw Chloe emerge from the living room. Her daughter looked shaken but unharmed. Ow, Diana asked. Tony was very chatty once I explained the situation. Did you know he's allergic to most painkillers? Made the interrogation much more efficient. Diana processed this information quickly. If Frank had taken Tony, then the car explosion, the phone call, all of it was theater. Which meant, Operation Nightfall isn't compromised, she said. On the contrary, it's working exactly as intended. We've been tracking your communications for the past 6 hours. Every SVR operative involved in Red Winter is now known to us. Diana looked at her daughter. Chloe, I'm sorry, Mom. He made me choose. The betrayal cut deep, but Diana was a professional first and a mother second. She'd made similar choices during her own career. Still, it stung. So what now? Diana asked. You turn me over to the FBI? Life in prison for your devoted wife. Actually, I have something else in mind. Frank stood, keeping the gun trained on her. You're going to contact your handlers and tell them Red Winter is proceeding on schedule. Then you're going to help us feed them false information that will lead to the complete destruction of SVR operations on the East Coast. And if I refuse? Frank's expression didn't change. Then you die. Here. Tonight. And your body disappears into the James River. Diana studied her husband's face and saw no mercy there. The mild-mannered accountant was gone, replaced by the predator she'd always known lurked beneath the surface. You're bluffing. You wouldn't kill your own wife. Frank's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and smiled coldly. Tony Vasquez was found dead in his apartment 20 minutes ago. Apparent heart attack brought on by severe trauma. Very sad. Diana felt ice form in her stomach. Frank had executed Tony in cold blood, made it look natural. The man she'd lived with for 12 years was capable of casual murder. "What about Chloe?" she asked. "Chloe is going to help clean up the mess you've made. Her cooperation will determine whether she has a future in this country or spends her adult life in a federal facility." Diana looked at her daughter again. Chloe had chosen survival over loyalty, exactly what Diana herself would have done. Perhaps there was hope for the girl after all. "I'll need guarantees," Diana said. "Immunity, protection, relocation." "You'll get exactly what you've earned," Frank interrupted. "Nothing more." Diana weighed her options. Cooperation might mean life in witness protection. Refusal meant death. The choice was obvious. "What do you need me to do?" Chapter 9. The Shadow's Justice. 6 months later, Frank Morrison sat in a coffee shop in Vienna, Austria, watching snow fall on cobblestone streets. The Vienna Cafe was a hub for intelligence professionals from every major service. The kind of place where enemies bought each other drinks while planning mutual destruction. Operation Red Winter had been a complete success from the SVR's perspective, right up until the moment it wasn't. Diana had played her role perfectly, feeding Moscow intelligence that led them to expand the operation prematurely. 17 SVR operatives had been arrested across 6 states. 3 safe houses had been compromised. Most importantly, the Russians had revealed their entire network of burned American assets, former CIA, NSA, and military personnel who'd been living quiet lives until Moscow decided they were too dangerous to leave alive. All of them were now under federal protection. All of them owed their lives to Frank's betrayal of his own family. Gregory Mitchell approached Frank's table, carrying 2 cups of coffee and the weight of a successful but morally complex operation. "She's asking to see you again," Mitchell said, settling into the opposite chair. "And my answer remains the same." Diana Morrison was currently in federal custody, awaiting trial for espionage. Her cooperation had been valuable, but Frank had no interest in seeing her again. The woman he'd married had never existed. She'd been a carefully constructed fiction designed to exploit his loneliness and trauma. "What about Chloe?" Frank sipped his coffee, thinking about his daughter. Chloe was also in federal custody, but her age and cooperation had earned her a different fate. Instead of prison, she was being offered a chance at redemption through service. A carefully supervised career with American intelligence, using her training to serve the country she'd betrayed. "She made her choice," Frank said finally. "Actions have consequences." "She was a child, Frank, manipulated by people she trusted. She was 15 when she started reporting on me, old enough to understand the consequences of betrayal." Frank met Mitchell's eyes. "I don't forgive traitors, Greg. Not even my own daughter." Mitchell nodded, understanding. He'd seen Frank make similar decisions during their years together, cutting away anyone who posed a threat, regardless of personal relationships. It was what made Frank effective and what made him dangerous. "The agency wants you back," Mitchell said. "Full reinstatement, desk job, good pension. I'm retired. You saved hundreds of lives. You stopped a major intelligence disaster. That deserves recognition." Frank smiled grimly. "I prevented my own murder and eliminated people who betrayed me. Everything else was just good citizenship." Mitchell left 20 minutes later, carrying Frank's final refusal to return to CIA service. Frank remained at his table, watching the snow and thinking Diana would spend the rest of her life in prison, assuming she lived that long. Intelligence officers who betrayed their services rarely died of old age, even in federal custody. Chloe would serve her country for the next 20 years, if she was lucky. If she wasn't, she'd make a mistake and end up like her mother. Frank suspected it would be the latter. The girl had too much of Diana's calculating coldness to ever be truly trustworthy. Tony Vasquez was dead, killed in what appeared to be a heart attack, but was actually the result of a small device Frank had placed in his pocket. The device had delivered a precisely calibrated electrical shock 12 hours after activation, long enough for Frank to be elsewhere when Tony died. 17 other SVR operatives were either dead or imprisoned. Their networks had been rolled up, their assets exposed, their operations terminated. Frank Morrison, the Shadow, had won completely. As evening fell over Vienna, Frank paid his bill and walked out into the snow. Tomorrow he would fly to Thailand, then to New Zealand, finally settling somewhere warm and anonymous. He had enough money to disappear permanently and enough skills to stay dead. Behind him, he left the wreckage of a marriage built on lies, a daughter trained to betray her own family, and an intelligence operation that had consumed dozens of lives. He felt no guilt about any of it. In Frank's world, there were only two types of people: those who could be trusted and those who deserved exactly what they got. His family had chosen their side. He had chosen his. The shadow walked into the falling snow and disappeared, leaving behind only the memory of what happened to people who betrayed Frank Morrison. The mild-mannered accountant was gone forever. In his place walked a ghost who would never again make the mistake of trusting anyone with his life. Some people deserve forgiveness. His family had not been among them. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Subscribe to Infidelity Tales Lab for more stories. Now let's begin this one. Chapter 1. The Neighbor's Generosity. Mitchell Holder had always considered himself a decent judge of character. After 12 years as a forensic consultant for pharmaceutical litigation, he'd developed an instinct for deception. The slight hesitation before a lie, the overcompensation of false sincerity, the rehearsed quality of manufactured emotion. So when Winfred Krause appeared at his door that Thursday evening with a carefully wrapped package, Mitchell's first instinct was to be polite but cautious. "Mitchell, glad I caught you," Winfred said, his smile wide but somehow not reaching his pale blue eyes. The man was in his early 50s, rail-thin, with prematurely white hair that he kept meticulously combed. He'd moved into the house 3 doors down about 8 months ago, and while he'd been neighborly enough, waving from his porch, making small talk about the weather, there was something Mitchell could never quite pin down that made him uncomfortable. "Winfred, hey," Mitchell replied, keeping his body in the doorway. From inside, he could hear his wife Christine laughing at something their daughter Maya was saying. Thursday nights were sacred in the Holder household. Family dinner, no phones, no distractions. "I won't keep you. I know it's dinner time." Winfred thrust the package forward. It was wrapped in butcher paper, tied with twine, condensation already forming on the outside. "I've got a buddy who runs a specialty butcher shop upstate. Dry ages beef in a climate-controlled room, the whole 9 yards. He gave me 2 porterhouses, and I thought, who better to share this with than my neighbors?" Mitchell accepted the package reflexively, feeling the cold weight of it in his hands. "That's very generous of you, Winfred. You didn't have to do that." "Nonsense. We're neighbors, Mitchell. Besides, a cut like this deserves to be enjoyed by someone who'll appreciate it." Winfred's smile widened. "That's a 45-day aged beauty right there. Cost my buddy $300 for the pair. Just season it with salt and pepper, sear it in a cast iron. You'll think you died and went to heaven." Something about the way Winfred said died made Mitchell's skin prickle, but he pushed the feeling aside. "Well, thank you, Christine, and I will enjoy it this weekend." "You do that." Winfred was already backing away, that unsettling smile still fixed in place. "Oh, and Mitchell, don't overcook it. Rare to medium rare is the only way to eat a steak like that. Otherwise, you're just wasting it." After Winfred left, Mitchell stood in the doorway for a moment, looking down at the package. The paper was high quality, professional. Everything about the gift seemed legitimate, yet something gnawed at him. He shook his head, dismissing his paranoia, and headed to the kitchen. "Who was that?" Christine asked, stirring something that smelled like her grandmother's marinara sauce. At 38, she still had the same bright energy that had attracted Mitchell when they'd met at a friend's barbecue 15 years ago. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she wore one of his old college t-shirts over her jeans. "Winfred from down the street. He brought us a steak." Mitchell unwrapped the package on the counter, revealing a massive porterhouse that did indeed look perfectly aged, deep red with white marbling. The fat cap yellowed with time. "That's nice of him," Christine said, leaning over to look. "Wow, That's a serious piece of meat. Yeah. Mitchell rewrapped it and put it in the refrigerator. He said it cost his friend $300. For one steak. For two. He got a pair. Christine laughed. Well, we're moving up in the world. Maybe we should have him over for dinner sometime. Mitchell closed the fridge and turned to face his wife. Has he ever struck you as off? Winfrey. Christine considered this while she stirred. I don't know. He's quiet. Polite. What? No reason. Mitchell kissed her cheek. Just my suspicious nature kicking in. Where's Maya? Upstairs pretending to do homework. Probably texting Derek. Mitchell groaned. Their daughter had just turned 16, and the advent of boyfriends had aged him considerably in the past year. I'll get her. That night, after Maya had gone to bed and Christine had fallen asleep reading, Mitchell found himself standing in the kitchen, staring at the refrigerator. The house was quiet except for the hum of the appliance and the distant sound of a car passing on the street. He opened the fridge and looked at the wrapped steak again. It looked perfect, but something was wrong. He'd built his career on trusting his instincts, on the subtle wrongness that indicated fraud or deception. And every instinct he had was screaming at him about this steak. Mitchell pulled out his phone and did something he rarely did. He Googled Winfred Krause. The search results were sparse. A LinkedIn profile that listed him as retired, with a background in pharmaceuticals and chemical engineering. No social media presence. No photos except the generic LinkedIn headshot. He narrowed the search, adding pharmaceuticals and their city name. Nothing relevant. He tried chemical engineer and got pages of irrelevant results. Then, on a whim, he added lawsuit to the search. The third result made his blood run cold. It was a news article from 7 years ago, archived from a local paper in Oregon. Former chemist settles lawsuit after lab incident. He clicked through, and there was Winfred's face, younger but unmistakable. The article was vague on details, citing proprietary concerns, but it mentioned that Winfred Krause had been let go from a pharmaceutical testing facility after irregularities were discovered in his research protocols. The company had settled with 3 families for undisclosed amounts. Mitchell's hands were shaking as he searched for more information, but there was nothing else. The story had been buried, likely as part of the settlement agreement. But it was enough. He closed his laptop and stared at the refrigerator again. What had Winfred Krause put in that steak? Chapter 2. The Butcher's Eye. Friday morning arrived with Christine's father, Dave Richardson, making his weekly surprise visit. At 72, Dave was still robust and sharp. A former butcher who'd owned Richardson's Meats in downtown Philadelphia for 40 years before selling it and retiring to Florida. But he couldn't stay away from his daughter and granddaughter, so every few months he'd fly up and spend a week or two at their house, driving Christine crazy with his insistence on reorganizing their kitchen and critiquing Mitchell's grilling technique. Pop! Christine hugged her father at the door while Mitchell came downstairs, still knotting his tie. He had a meeting with a client at 10, but he was glad to see Dave. Dave, good to see you, Mitchell said, shaking his father-in-law's hand. The older man had a grip like a vice, a remnant of decades spent breaking down sides of beef. Mitchell, you look tired. Christine working you too hard. Dave's eyes twinkled with mischief. Just the usual chaos, Mitchell replied. Let me get my briefcase, and I'll get out of your hair. I'm sure you two have catching up to do. Actually, I'll put my stuff away and make breakfast, Dave said. You eaten yet? Just coffee, Christine admitted. Criminal. Go on, Mitchell. We'll save you a plate. Mitchell grabbed his briefcase and headed out, his mind still on the steak in the refrigerator. He decided to throw it away when he got home. Better safe than sorry. But when Mitchell returned that evening, the house was in chaos. He knew something was wrong the moment he pulled into the driveway. Christine's car was there, but so was Dave's rental, parked at an odd angle as if he'd been in a hurry. The front door was unlocked. Christine, Mitchell called out, dropping his briefcase in the foyer. In the kitchen, he found his wife standing by the counter, her face pale. Dave was on his phone, pacing by the window, his expression grim. What's wrong? That steak, Christine said, her voice shaking. Dad saw it in the fridge. Mitchell looked at Dave, who just ended his call. The older man's face was set in hard lines, his jaw clenched. Mitchell, I need you to listen to me very carefully, Dave said. We need to get Christine and Maya out of this house. Now. Dad, what are you? Now, Mitchell. Dave's voice cracked like a whip. Get them out. We're going to the police station. Mitchell had never seen his father-in-law like this. Not angry, but afraid. And if Dave Richardson was afraid, something was terribly wrong. Christine, get Maya, Mitchell said immediately. Throw some clothes in a bag. We're leaving. Mitchell, do it. 15 minutes later, they were in 2 cars heading toward the police station. Dave had insisted on bringing the steak, which he'd wrapped in multiple layers of plastic bags, and put in a cooler. Maya sat in the back of Mitchell's car, confused and frightened, while Christine made phone calls trying to figure out what was happening. At the station, Dave asked for Detective Colin Page, apparently someone he'd called during Mitchell's drive home. Page was a solid-looking man in his 40s with close-cropped hair and the watchful eyes of someone who'd seen too much. Dave Richardson, Page said, shaking the older man's hand. It's been a while. Colin, thanks for seeing us on short notice. You said it was urgent. Something about contaminated meat. Can we go somewhere private? I need to show you something. Page led them to an interview room, and Dave carefully removed the wrapped steak from the cooler and placed it on the table. Even through the layers of plastic, Mitchell could see the deep red meat. What am I looking at? Page asked. Dave pulled out his phone and showed the detective a photo. This is what it looked like when I found it in my son-in-law's refrigerator this afternoon. Beautiful porterhouse, 45-day dry age. Perfect marbling, perfect color. Everything about it said expensive cut from a reputable butcher. Okay, but here's the thing, Colin. I was a butcher for 40 years. I've seen thousands of cuts of meat, aged hundreds of them myself, and something about this one bothered me. The color was right, the fat was right, but the smell. Dave shook his head. It was off. Not rotten, nothing obvious. Just wrong. So you think it's spoiled? No. Dave pulled out a small flashlight from his pocket, a UV blacklight. I think it's poisoned. I need to show you something, but you'll want to get your forensics people in here first. Page studied Dave's face for a long moment, then nodded and left the room. He returned 5 minutes later with a woman in a lab coat and a camera. This is Dr. Erica Glover, our forensics lead, Page said. Dave, show us what you're talking about. Dave carefully unwrapped the steak, keeping on the plastic. In the fluorescent light of the interview room, it looked like any other high-quality cut of meat. Then Dave turned off the lights and clicked on the UV flashlight. Mitchell felt his stomach turn to ice. Under the blacklight, the steak glowed with patches of sickly green fluorescence. Not evenly distributed, but concentrated in areas. The fat cap, certain sections of the meat, as if someone had carefully injected something into specific locations. Oh my God, Christine whispered. Dr. Glover leaned in, her face serious. Mr. Richardson, where did you say this came from? My neighbor gave it to me, Mitchell said, his voice hollow. Yesterday evening. Said it was a gift. Dave, what are we looking at? Page asked. I don't know exactly, Dave said. But in my 40 years as a butcher, I've never seen meat fluoresce under blacklight like this unless it was contaminated with something toxic. Some industrial chemicals glow under UV. So do certain biological compounds. This isn't natural aging, Colin. Someone put something in this meat. Dr. Glover was already taking photos, her movements precise and professional. We'll need to run a full toxicology panel. This could be anything from pesticides to heavy metals to, well, we won't speculate until we have results. Mitchell felt Christine grip his hand. He looked at his wife, saw the fear in her eyes, and then looked at Maya, who was crying silently. Someone had tried to poison his family, and Mitchell knew exactly who. Chapter 3. Beneath the Surface. The investigation moved quickly once Dr. Glover confirmed the presence of unusual compounds in the steak. By Monday morning, Mitchell sat in Detective Page's office, reviewing everything they'd learned about Winfred Krauss and what he'd learned on his own. Your neighbor has quite a history, Page said, sliding a thick folder across his desk. Winfred James Krauss, age 53, Ph.D. in biochemistry from MIT, worked in pharmaceutical research for 20 years. And you were right to be suspicious. He's been involved in 3 major incidents, though only one resulted in charges. Mitchell opened the folder, his anger growing with each page. Tell me, First incident was 12 years ago in Massachusetts. He was working for a pharmaceutical testing facility when 3 lab animals died unexpectedly. The company investigated internally, found evidence that Krauss had been running unauthorized experiments using compounds that weren't approved for testing. He was fired, but not charged. The company buried it to avoid bad publicity. Let me guess. The families who sued were the lab techs who got exposed. Close. 1 lab tech, 2 security guards who entered the contaminated area. All 3 developed neurological symptoms consistent with organophosphate poisoning. They settled for a combined $2.3 million, with strict NDAs attached. What was the second incident? Page's expression darkened. 5 years ago in Oregon, Krauss was working as a private consultant for a biotech startup. A rival company CEO got sick at a conference where Krauss was present. Severe poisoning, nearly died. The CEO claimed someone tampered with his food, but there was no direct evidence linking Krauss. However, the investigation revealed that Krauss had purchased several exotic compounds in the weeks prior, including some that matched the victim's toxicology report. Why wasn't he charged? Insufficient evidence. The compounds were commercially available. Krauss had a legitimate reason for purchasing them for his consulting work, and there was no proof he'd been near the CEO's food. The case went cold. Mitchell's hands tightened on the folder, and now he's living 3 doors down from me, giving my family poisoned meat. We're running a full analysis on the steak, Page said. Dr. Glover thinks it's some kind of synthetic compound, possibly designed to break down slowly in the body and mimic natural illness. If your family had eaten it, we'd have gotten sick, maybe died, and it would have looked like food poisoning or natural causes. Exactly. The question is, why? Did you know Krauss before he moved to your neighborhood? Never met him until he showed up at my door 8 months ago. Mitchell paused. But I need to tell you something. I'm a forensic consultant. I work on pharmaceutical litigation cases. Page's eyes narrowed. What kind of cases? I analyze financial records, research practices, clinical trial data, anything that might indicate fraud or misconduct. Usually, I'm working for plaintiffs' attorneys, helping them build cases against pharmaceutical companies. And have you ever worked on a case involving Winfried Krauss? Not directly, but I've worked on 3 cases in the past 5 years involving companies that Krauss had ties to. One of them, Bridgeport Pharmaceutical. I helped the plaintiffs prove that they'd falsified clinical trial data. The company settled for $45 million, and several executives went to prison. Page leaned back in his chair. When was this? The settlement was finalized about 10 months ago, right before Krauss moved to my neighborhood. Bingo, Page said quietly. Did Krauss work for Bridgeport? Not directly, but according to the documents I reviewed, he was a paid consultant during the time period when the fraud occurred. His name came up in about 20 emails, always CC'd on reports about the trials. He was never charged because we couldn't prove he knew about the falsified data. But if his consulting income depended on those contracts, and you destroyed the company, he lost a major source of revenue, Mitchell finished. And maybe he blamed me. Page pulled out his phone and made a call. I need a warrant for 847 Maple Drive, registered to Winfried Krauss. Suspected attempted poisoning, possible serial offenses. Yes, I'll hold. While they waited, Mitchell's mind raced. Winfried hadn't just moved to his neighborhood by chance. He'd been planning this. But for how long? And how had he known where Mitchell lived? Detective, there's something else, Mitchell said. Winfried told me the steak came from a friend's butcher shop upstate. But if he's poisoning people, he wouldn't risk involving a real butcher who might notice something wrong with the meat. You think he aged and prepared it himself? I think we'll find equipment in his house. A climate-controlled room, aging racks, maybe even a butcher's setup. He would have needed to practice to make it look legitimate. And if he's been doing this for years? Page's expression turned grim. There might be other victims. The warrant came through within 2 hours, and by Tuesday afternoon, the police had executed a search of Winfried Krauss's house. What they found confirmed Mitchell's worst fears and revealed something even more sinister. Mitchell sat with Christine in their living room while Detective Page and Dr. Glover briefed them. Dave had taken Maya to a friend's house, keeping her away from the details. We found a fully equipped meat aging facility in his basement, Dr. Glover began. Climate-controlled, professional-grade equipment, the whole setup. But we also found something else, a laboratory. He was synthesizing his own poisons, Page continued. We found at least 12 different compounds, all carefully labeled with formulas and dosages. Some were commercial chemicals, others were custom-made. And we found records. Christine's hand found Mitchell's. Records of what? Experiments, Dr. Glover said softly. He kept detailed notes on effects, symptoms, time to onset, time to death. He tested on animals first. We found remains in his backyard. But the notes suggest he moved to human subjects about 4 years ago. How many? Mitchell asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know. Based on the records, at least 7 people in 4 different states. All were rivals, competitors, or people he blamed for professional setbacks. He was methodical, patient. He'd move to a new location, establish himself as a neighbor or acquaintance, then strike when the opportunity presented itself. The stake, Christine said, her voice shaking. That was his method. One of them. He also used contaminated wine, poisoned chocolate scent as gifts, even modified supplements. The stake was his latest innovation. He perfected a slow-acting neurotoxin that breaks down body temperature, making it almost undetectable post-mortem. Your father's knowledge and that UV light saved your lives. Mitchell felt rage building in his chest, cold and controlled. Where is he now? That's the problem, Page said. He's missing. He must have known we were coming. We've issued a warrant for his arrest, but he's gone to ground. His phone is off, his car is gone, and we've alerted all the neighboring states. He's going to run, Mitchell said. He has to know you found everything. We have the evidence to convict him 100 times over, Page assured him. But first, we have to find him. Mitchell stood and walked to the window, looking down the street toward Winfred's house. It sat empty now, police tape across the door. But somewhere out there, Winfred Krause was free, and as long as he was, Mitchell's family wasn't safe. And Mitchell had no intention of waiting for the police to find him. That night, alone in his office while Christine slept upstairs, Mitchell opened his laptop and began to work. He'd spent 12 years tracking money, finding patterns in data, uncovering connections that others missed. Winfred Krause might be a brilliant chemist and a careful killer, but he'd made one critical mistake. He'd targeted a man who knew how to hunt through information and find the truth. And Mitchell was going to use every skill he had to make sure Winfred Krause paid for what he'd tried to do. Chapter 4. Following the money. 3 days after the police raid, Mitchell sat in his home office, surrounded by monitors, documents, and enough coffee to power a small city. He'd taken a leave of absence from work, telling his clients he had a family emergency, which was true, though not in the way they'd imagined. Christine had wanted him to let the police handle it, but they both knew the system had failed to stop Winfred before. 7 victims across 4 states, and the man had never spent a day in jail. That was going to change. Mitchell's specialty was following money, and everyone left a trail, especially someone who'd been moving from state to state, setting up elaborate staging grounds, and purchasing exotic chemicals. The police had Winfred's bank records, but they were looking for his current location. Mitchell was looking for his pattern. He started with the Bridgeport pharmaceutical connection. Winfred had been a consultant there, and Mitchell had all the financial records from his previous investigation. He cross-referenced Winfred's known addresses with the timeline of the company's fraud, building a picture of a man who'd been more deeply involved than anyone had realized. Winfred hadn't just been a consultant. He'd been the architect of the fraudulent research protocols. Mitchell found email chains buried in the discovery documents that showed Winfred coaching the research team on how to manipulate data, how to make dangerous side effects appear less severe, how to fast-track approval by focusing on favorable outcomes. He'd been careful, always staying one step removed, never signing anything directly incriminating. But he'd been paid well, very well. Mitchell traced the payments through 3 shell companies, following the money until he found pattern. Every 3 months, Winfred received a wire transfer of exactly $47,500, just under the $50,000 threshold that triggered additional IRS scrutiny. The payments had continued for 2 years, totaling over $800,000. Then the investigation had started, and the payments stopped. Mitchell leaned back in his chair, seeing the full picture now. Winfred had been living large on his consulting income, probably spending it as fast as it came in. When Bridgeport went down and the money dried up, he'd been left with expensive tastes and no legitimate way to maintain them. His professional reputation was destroyed. No company would touch him after the scandal. So he turned to revenge, methodically targeting everyone he blamed for his downfall. But revenge didn't pay the bills. Mitchell opened a new search, looking for any financial activity tied to Winfred's known aliases. The police had found 3 fake IDs in his house, all with different names, but Winfred's photo. Mitchell ran each name through every database he had access to, looking for bank accounts, credit cards, utility bills, anything. He found it at 3 a.m. One of the aliases, William J. Kramer, had a credit card that was still active. The police had missed it because the card was registered to an address in Nevada, and they'd been focusing on local accounts. But Mitchell's software flagged it because of a single unusual transaction, a payment to a storage facility in Delaware, made just 2 days after the police raid. Delaware, less than 3 hours away. Mitchell pulled up the storage facility's information and found something interesting. It was a climate-controlled, high-security facility that specialized in long-term storage. The kind of place where someone might keep important documents, backup equipment, or emergency supplies. The kind of place where someone planning to disappear might have a backup plan. Mitchell grabbed his phone and called Detective Page. It was 3 a.m., but he didn't care. This better be important. Holder, Page answered, his voice groggy. I found him. Or at least, I found where he's been preparing his escape. Mitchell heard rustling. Then Page's voice became sharper. Talk to me. Storage facility in Delaware. Unit rented under one of his aliases. The credit card shows he's been paying for it for 3 years, long before he moved to our neighborhood. He's been planning this, Detective. He has a bolt hole ready. Address? Mitchell rattled it off. But there's more. I went back through his pattern of movements, and I found something. After each of his previous attacks, he didn't just disappear randomly. He moved to very specific locations, always in states with minimal professional licensing requirements for consultants, always in areas with low police presence, but good access to major cities. He's been following a playbook. Exactly. And based on the pattern after Delaware, he'll head south, probably North Carolina or Georgia, somewhere he can establish a new identity and start over. Or find his next victim, Page said grimly. I'll have Delaware police check out that storage unit first thing in the morning. Don't wait, Mitchell said. If he's still in the area, he might be planning to access it soon. And Detective, I want to be there when you find him. Mitchell, he tried to murder my family. I have a right to see him caught. It was a long pause. I'll call you when we're moving. But you stay back and let us handle the arrest, understood? Understood. Mitchell hung up and sat back, feeling his heart racing. They were close now. He could feel it. But as he stared at the screens, showing Winfred's pattern of movement, a cold realization crept over him. Winfred was smart, methodical, and had been planning his escape for years. He wouldn't just run to Delaware and hope for the best. He'd have contingencies, backup plans, maybe even one final act before he disappeared. Mitchell stood and walked down the hall to Maya's room. He opened the door quietly and watched his daughter sleeping, her phone still clutched in her hand. Then he went to the master bedroom and watched Christine sleep, her face peaceful and untroubled. Winfred had wanted to take this from him, had wanted to poison them slowly, make them suffer, destroy his family as revenge for destroying Winfred's career. Mitchell made a decision then. He wasn't just going to help the police catch Winfred. He was going to make sure Winfred paid for every victim, every life he destroyed or ended. And he was going to use what he knew best, finding the truth and exposing it, to ensure Winfred never hurt anyone again. Chapter 5. The Trap Within a Trap. The Delaware storage facility was exactly what Mitchell expected. A sprawling complex of climate-controlled units behind 2 layers of security fencing. Detective Page had coordinated with local police and they'd assembled a small team for what they hoped would be a simple evidence recovery. Mitchell watched from Page's unmarked car as officers in tactical gear approached Unit 247. It was early morning, the sun just beginning to rise, and there were no other vehicles in the lot. According to the facility manager, the unit hadn't been accessed in 3 days. "It's clean," one of the officers called out after checking for alarms or traps. They cut the lock and rolled up the door. Mitchell saw Page's expression change immediately. "What the hell?" They approached the unit, and Mitchell felt his stomach drop. The space was empty except for a single metal table in the center. On the table sat a laptop computer, powered on, its screen glowing in the dim light of the unit. "Don't touch it," Detective Page ordered. "Get the tech team up here." But Mitchell was already reading the message displayed on the screen, visible even from outside the unit. "Hello, Mitchell. I wondered how long it would take you to find this. Quite impressive. Shall we talk?" Below the message was a video call interface showing a live feed. And in that feed, sitting in what appeared to be a hotel room, was Winfred Krause. "Son of a bitch," Page muttered. "He's been waiting for us." "He's been waiting for me," Mitchell corrected. Before Page could stop him, he walked into the unit and stood in front of the camera. Winfred's face filled the screen, that same unsettling smile he'd worn when delivering the poisoned steak. "Mitchell, right on time. I must say, I'm impressed. I expected the police to find this eventually, but I thought it would take them weeks, not days. You've been busy. Where are you, Winfred? Now, where's the fun in telling you that? But I did want to congratulate you. You destroyed my life very thoroughly, more thoroughly than I'd expected. I'd worked with Bridgeport for 5 years, helped them build their entire research division. And you came along and dismantled it all in 6 months. You helped them falsify clinical trials. People die because of drugs that should never have been approved. People die every day, Mitchell. That's the nature of pharmaceutical research. Risks and rewards, costs and benefits. But you couldn't see that, could you? You had to be the hero, the crusader for justice." Winfred's smile widened. "So I decided to teach you about costs and benefits. Your life for mine. Your family's suffering for my lost career. The police have everything, Winfred. Your lab, your records, evidence of 7 murders. You're done. Am I?" Winfred leaned forward, his eyes glittering. "Did you really think I'd keep all my materials in one place? That laptop you're looking at contains encrypted files that will automatically upload to various law enforcement agencies in—" He glanced at a watch. "Approximately 6 hours. Files that detail not just my work, but the work of others in the pharmaceutical industry. Fraud you've never uncovered, trials you've never investigated, deaths that have been quietly buried." Mitchell felt Page move up beside him. "What's your endgame, Krause?" "Detective Page, I presume." "My endgame, as you call it, is simple. I disappear, Mitchell Holder learns what it's like to lose everything, and the pharmaceutical industry gets exposed for what it truly is. Everyone wins. Or rather, everyone loses. We'll find you," Mitchell said quietly. "Will you? I've been planning this for 3 years, Mitchell. I have resources you can't imagine, identities you'll never trace, and a very comfortable future ahead of me. But I wanted you to know one thing before I go. You didn't save your family. You just delayed their pain." The screen went black. Mitchell stared at the dead monitor, then turned to Page. "Trace it. Now." "Already on it," Page said, phone to his ear. But 15 minutes later, the tech team confirmed what Mitchell had suspected. The call had been routed through multiple VPN servers across 3 continents. Winfred could have been anywhere. They brought the laptop back to the forensics lab, where Dr. Glover and her team began carefully analyzing it. The files Winfred had mentioned were indeed there, heavily encrypted, with a timer counting down. "Can you stop the upload?" Mitchell asked. "We can try," Dr. Glover said, "but this is sophisticated encryption. Military grade. If we try to force it, we might trigger the upload early or corrupt the files entirely. What's in them? Without decryption, no way to know. But based on the file sizes and structure, it's a massive data dump. Thousands of documents, emails, research files." Mitchell thought about Winfred's threat. The man had spent 20 years in pharmaceutical research, working with dozens of companies. If he'd been collecting evidence of fraud all that time, the files could bring down entire corporations. Or it could be a bluff, one final attempt to maintain control. "Let it upload," Mitchell said suddenly. Everyone turned to stare at him. "Are you insane?" Paige asked. "If there's sensitive information in there, then it deserves to come out," Mitchell interrupted. "Winfred thinks he's playing one last game, that he can use this information to hurt people. But what if we let him? What if we let those files go public, and we use them to track where he sent them from?" Dr. Glover caught on first. If he's confident enough to let the files upload, he might not be routing through VPNs for the actual transfer. He'll want to verify they arrived intact, maybe even watch the fallout in real time, which means a direct connection. Paige finished. "Mitchell, that's actually brilliant. But we need approval from a lot of people before we let potentially damaging information go public." "Then get approval. We have 6 hours." The next few hours were a flurry of activity. Paige worked the phones, getting authorization from the FBI, the Justice Department, and a judge who was initially skeptical but became convinced when Paige explained the potential to catch a serial killer. Meanwhile, Mitchell worked with Dr. Glover's team to set up monitoring software that would trace any connection the laptop made during the upload. While they worked, Mitchell called Christine. "Hey," she answered immediately. "Please tell me you're not doing anything dangerous. I'm at a police forensics lab. Pretty safe." "Mitchell, we're close, Chris. Really close. But I need you and Maya to stay with your parents for another few days. Don't go back to the house. Don't go anywhere predictable. You think he'll come after us again? I think he's desperate, and desperate people do unpredictable things. Just please, humor me." "Okay, but Mitchell, be careful. I didn't marry you so I could raise Maya alone. I promise. I love you." "Love you too." When the timer hit 0, they were ready. The laptop began uploading files to a dozen different servers: FBI, local police departments, news agencies, and watchdog organizations. As predicted, Winfred was confident enough in his encryption-breaking abilities and the chaos the information would cause that he'd established a direct connection to monitor the upload. And that connection led them straight to him. "Got him," the FBI tech specialist said. "Hotel in Charleston, South Carolina. Room 614. Detective Paige was already on the radio. "Charleston PD, we need immediate assistance." But Mitchell was looking at the list of files being uploaded, and something caught his eye. One folder was labeled Backup Contingencies, and it was significantly larger than the others. He clicked on it, and his blood ran cold. It was a target list. 12 names, 12 addresses, 12 detailed profiles. And at the top of the list were his own name, Christine's, and Maya's. But there were 9 other names, people he'd never heard of, spread across 8 states. Each profile included photos, daily routines, work schedules, and family information. And next to several of the names were check marks. These were Winfred's future victims. People he'd researched, people he planned to target if he escaped. "Detective," Mitchell called out, his voice tight. "We need to contact these people. Right now. 9 of them, all potential targets." Paige looked at the list and swore. "Give me the FBI field offices in each of these states. Move." While police coordinated with authorities across the country to protect Winfred's potential victims, Mitchell stared at the profiles and felt a cold rage settle over him. This wasn't just revenge anymore. Winfred was a predator who'd carefully selected his next targets. People who'd wronged him, competed with him, or simply been in his way. And he planned to continue killing for years. The Charleston arrest team reported in 15 minutes later. The hotel room was empty. Winfred had left less than an hour before they arrived, probably alerted by surveillance he'd set up to watch for police activity. But they found his laptop still uploading files, and on the desk, another message, this one handwritten. Detective Paige read it aloud over the phone. "We're getting warmer, Mitchell, but you'll never get close enough. Enjoy the files. Consider them my gift to the public good. And say goodbye to your peaceful life. You've just made a very powerful enemy." Mitchell closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the hunt pressing down on him. Winfred was always one step ahead, always planning, always thinking 3 moves in advance. But he'd made one mistake. He'd shown Mitchell his pattern. and Mitchell was very, very good at finding patterns. Chapter 6. The Convergence. 2 weeks after the Charleston near miss, Mitchell had transformed his home office into something resembling a conspiracy theorist war room. Maps covered one wall, marked with pins showing Winfred's known locations, storage facilities, and potential targets. 3 monitors displayed constantly updating searches, tracking credit card transactions, vehicle registrations, and property records under every alias they'd identified. Detective Page visited regularly, keeping Mitchell informed of the official investigation while grudgingly admitting that Mitchell's financial forensics had uncovered more leads than the entire police network. The FBI had joined a manhunt, classifying Winfred as a serial killer and potential domestic terrorist after analyzing the files he'd released. Those files had been devastating. Winfred's documentation had exposed fraud at 17 pharmaceutical companies, leading to congressional hearings, criminal investigations, and billions in settlements. Mitchell's name was all over the news as the consultant who'd initially exposed Bridgeport Pharmaceutical, the investigation that had apparently pushed Winfred Krause over the edge. The media attention had forced Mitchell to move his family to a secure location, a rental house in the suburbs under Dave's name, with private security that Mitchell paid for with money he didn't really have. Christine had stopped asking when this would end. Maya had nightmares. But Mitchell was close. He could feel it. The break came on a Tuesday evening. Mitchell had been analyzing Winfred's past movements, specifically the gaps between his known locations, periods where he seemed to disappear for weeks at a time. Most investigators assumed these were times when Winfred was traveling or hiding, but Mitchell saw something else. They were preparation periods, times when Winfred would establish his next identity, set up his next staging ground, and select his next victim. Mitchell had found 3 such locations that Winfred had abandoned: a rental house in Oregon, an apartment in Massachusetts, and a condo in Texas. The police had searched all of them after Winfred's identity was exposed, finding them empty except for basic furniture. Nothing useful, according to the reports. But Mitchell wasn't looking for evidence. He was looking for pattern. All 3 locations were near universities with strong chemistry programs. All 3 were in neighborhoods with high turnover rates where new residents wouldn't attract attention. And all 3 had been rented through property management companies that accepted cash deposits and didn't run thorough background checks. Mitchell expanded his search, looking for similar properties in states where Winfred hadn't yet established a presence. He cross-referenced them with universities, with locations near his potential targets, with areas that matched Winfred's preferences for climate and population density. He found 8 possible matches. Then he filtered by recent rental activity, properties that had been rented in the past month by cash-paying tenants with minimal documentation. 3 properties remained: 1 in Virginia, 1 in Georgia, 1 in Tennessee. Mitchell pulled up property records for all 3, looking for anything unusual. The Virginia property was a dead end, rented by a family with kids, clearly legitimate. The Georgia property was possible, but the tenant had provided employment references that checked out. The Tennessee property was different. It was a small house on the outskirts of Knoxville, rented 4 weeks ago by someone named Wesley Kramer. Single occupant, no employment references required, 6 months rent paid in cash. The property management company's notes mentioned that the tenant was quiet and kept to himself. Mitchell pulled up satellite images of the property. It was isolated, surrounded by woods, with a detached garage that could easily hide a vehicle. The nearest neighbors were a quarter-mile away, perfect for someone who needed privacy for illegal activities. Mitchell grabbed his phone and called Paige. "I found him. You've said that before, Holder. This time I'm sure. Knoxville, Tennessee, 1547 Hollow Creek Road. Rented a month ago under another alias. All the hallmarks of his previous safe houses. I'll contact the Tennessee field office." "No," Mitchell interrupted. "If you send police, he'll run again. He's been watching for official responses, probably has alerts set up for any law enforcement activity in his areas. We need a different approach." "Mitchell, I can't authorize a civilian operation. I'm not asking for authorization. I'm telling you where he is. What you do with that information is up to you. But I'm going to Tennessee." "The hell you are. This man is a serial killer who targeted my family. I have as much right to see him caught as anyone." Mitchell took a breath, forcing calm into his voice. "Detective, I'm not talking about vigilante justice. I'm talking about doing what I do best, gathering information. I'll watch the house, confirm it's him, and then I'll call you. By then, you'll have Tennessee authorities ready to move." There was a long pause. 24 hours, Paige finally said. "You go to Knoxville, you watch the house, and you call me the moment you have confirmation. But if you do anything, and I mean anything, that compromises the official investigation, I'll have you arrested for obstruction." "Clear. Crystal." Mitchell hung up and began packing. He told Christine he was following a lead, that he'd be gone for a day or two, that he'd be careful. She didn't argue anymore. She'd learned that Mitchell wasn't going to stop until this ended. Dave, however, was a different story. "I'm coming with you," the older man said, appearing in Mitchell's office as he gathered his laptop and documents. "Dave, no. This could be dangerous. Exactly why you need backup. You're good with numbers, Mitchell, but you're not a fighter. I spent 6 years in the Marines before I became a butcher. I know how to handle myself." Mitchell studied his father-in-law. At 72, Dave was still solid muscle, with the kind of calm competence that came from real experience. And Mitchell had to admit, going alone to confront a serial killer wasn't the smartest plan. "You stay in the car," Mitchell said finally. "You're backup only. We're there to observe and confirm, nothing more." Agreed. They left that night, driving through darkness toward Tennessee. Mitchell used the time to brief Dave on everything he'd learned about Winfred, his methods, his psychology, his escape patterns. By the time they reached Knoxville, both men had a clear picture of who they were dealing with. The house on Hollow Creek Road was exactly as Mitchell had imagined. Small, nondescript, with overgrown grass and windows covered with heavy curtains. A silver sedan was parked in the detached garage, visible through a gap in the door. Mitchell and Dave parked a quarter-mile away, tucked behind a cluster of trees with a clear view of the property. The sun was rising, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. "Now what?" Dave asked. "Now we wait." They waited for 6 hours. Around noon, the front door opened, and a figure emerged. Even at a distance, Mitchell recognized Winfred's distinctive walk, slightly hunched, purposeful but unhurried. He was carrying 2 bags of garbage. Mitchell grabbed his camera and zoomed in, taking dozens of photos. Winfred's face was clearly visible, no attempt at disguise. He looked relaxed, confident. He thought he was safe. After disposing of the garbage, Winfred went back inside. Mitchell reviewed the photos, confirming every detail, then called Detective Page. "It's him. 1547, Hollow Creek Road, Knoxville. I have photographic confirmation. Stay put. I'm contacting Tennessee now. They'll have a team there within 2 hours. We'll be here." Mitchell hung up and settled in to wait. Beside him, Dave was quiet, his eyes never leaving the house. "What happens when they arrest him?" Dave asked. "Trial. He'll go to prison for the rest of his life. And if he doesn't?" Mitchell didn't answer, because they both knew what Dave was really asking. What if Winfred escaped again? What if the legal system failed, like it had failed 7 other victims? They sat in silence, watching the house, waiting for justice to arrive. But in the back of his mind, Mitchell was already considering contingencies. Because if Winfred Krause somehow slipped through the system's fingers again, Mitchell had learned something important over these past weeks. He learned that he was capable of far more than just analyzing numbers and following money. He learned that when someone threatened his family, he would do whatever it took to stop them. And if the law couldn't stop Winfred Krause, then Mitchell would find another way. Chapter 7. The Endgame. The Tennessee authorities arrived exactly 2 hours later. 3 unmarked cars that took up positions around the property. Detective Page had coordinated with Special Agent Darnell Bridges from the FBI's Knoxville office, and Mitchell watched from his vantage point as they prepared to execute the arrest warrant. But something was wrong. Mitchell felt it in his gut, that same instinct that had warned him about the poisoned steak. The operation was too smooth, too visible. Despite their unmarked cars, a trained observer, and Winfred was certainly that, would spot the coordination, the professional movements, the way the agents communicated. "Dave, get ready to move," Mitchell said quietly. "What's wrong?" "I don't know yet, but something's off." Agent Bridges gave the signal, and the arrest team moved toward the house. Front door, back door, windows, textbook approach. Mitchell heard the loudspeaker. "Winfred Krause, this is the FBI. Come out with your hands up." Nothing. The team breached the door and swept through the house. Mitchell watched through binoculars as they cleared room after room. Then Agent Bridges emerged, his expression grim. He was talking into his radio, shaking his head. Mitchell's phone rang. "He's gone," Detective Page said. "House is empty. Looks like he's been gone for hours." "That's impossible. I saw him at noon." "Are you sure it was him?" Mitchell pulled up the photos on his camera, zooming in on the face. It was definitely Winfred. Same features, same build, same distinctive walk. Then he looked closer at the background of one photo at the window behind Winfred as he'd walked to the garbage cans. There was something in that window, a faint glow that looked like a screen, a computer monitor. "Son of a bitch," Mitchell breathed. "It's a deep fake." He set up a camera system and a projector. What I saw was a recorded image being projected behind the window. He was never here. Then where the hell is he? Mitchell's mind raced. Winfred had known they'd find this location eventually. He'd wanted them to find it, wanted them to waste resources on another empty safe house while he what? Mitchell thought about Winfred's pattern, his psychology. The man was a narcissist who needed to prove his superiority. He'd released the pharmaceutical files to cause chaos, to show the world what he was capable of. He'd led them on a chase across multiple states, always staying one step ahead. But none of that was his endgame. His endgame was revenge against Mitchell. "He's going after my family," Mitchell said, already running toward his car. "Mitchell, your family is in a secure location. He's had weeks to find them. Dave, we need to move." They were in the car and speeding back toward Pennsylvania before Agent Bridges could stop them. Mitchell called Christine's number. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. He tried Maya. Same result. "Dave, call your wife." Dave pulled out his phone, but before he could dial, Mitchell's phone rang with a number he didn't recognize. He answered, putting it on speaker. "Hello, Mitchell." Winfred's voice was calm, almost pleasant. "By now, you've realized that the house in Tennessee was a decoy. Clever of you to spot it so quickly. I really have underestimated your capabilities. Where are they?" "Your family is safe. For now. In fact, they're right where you left them. That charming rental house under your father-in-law's name. Did you really think I couldn't track a simple property rental? I've been watching them for days, Mitchell. Watching your wife take your daughter to school, watching them go grocery shopping, watching them sleep at night." Mitchell's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "If you touch them, you'll what? You're 5 hours away at least. And I'm already inside the house. Your private security is very good, but not good enough to stop someone who knows how to synthesize a sedative gas that works through ventilation systems." Mitchell felt his blood turn to ice. "What do you want?" "What I've always wanted, for you to understand loss. You destroyed my career, my reputation, my entire life. So I'm going to destroy yours. Your wife and daughter won't die quickly, Mitchell. That would be too merciful. Instead, they're going to become my final masterpiece, test subjects for compounds I've been developing for years. You'll watch them deteriorate slowly, knowing that every moment of their suffering is because of you." "You're insane." "No, I'm brilliant, and I'm patient, and I'm already in control." There was a pause. Then Winfred's voice became businesslike. "You have one chance to save them. Come to the house alone. No police, no FBI, no backup. If I see anyone else, I'll release the gas immediately. You have 2 hours from now." The line went dead. Dave was already calling his wife, while Mitchell pulled up the security company's number. The call connected to their monitoring center. "This is Mitchell Holder, account 7743. I need an immediate welfare check on my property." "One moment, sir." There was typing, then a concerned pause. "Mr. Holder, our system shows the house alarm was disabled about 30 minutes ago using your wife's code." "She didn't disable it. Someone's in the house. Send everyone you have and call the police." "Sir, our contract specifies." "Send them now." Mitchell hung up and called Detective Page, explaining the situation while driving 20 miles over the speed limit. Page promised to coordinate with local police, but they both knew it would take time to organize a proper response. Time Mitchell didn't have. "Dave, I need you to listen to me very carefully," Mitchell said. "When we get to the house, you're going to stay in the car and wait for the police." "Like hell I am. Winfred wants me to come alone. If he sees you, he'll kill them. But I have a plan, and I need you to execute it exactly the way I tell you." Mitchell explained quickly, his mind working through possibilities and contingencies. It was risky, borderline insane, but it was the only way to save his family and stop Winfred permanently. Dave listened, his face grim, then nodded. "It's your call. But Mitchell, don't die in there. Christine would kill me." They made the 5-hour drive in just under 4 hours, Mitchell's car screaming down highways and back roads. The sun was setting when they reached the neighborhood where the rental house sat quietly on a tree-lined street. Everything looked normal. A few neighbors walking dogs, kids playing basketball in a driveway, 2 houses down. The security company's vehicle was parked outside, 2 guards talking on their radios. Mitchell parked a block away and approached the guards. "I'm Mitchell Holder, the homeowner. What's the situation?" "Mr. Holder, we've been trying to establish contact with your family, but there's no response. We haven't entered the premises because protocol requires police presence for potential hostage situations. Units are en route." "How long?" 10 minutes, maybe 15. "Too long. Winfred's deadline had passed 5 minutes ago." Mitchell looked at the house, a 2-story colonial with a manicured lawn and large windows. The curtains were drawn, no movement visible. But somewhere inside, his wife and daughter were trapped with a serial killer. "I'm going in," Mitchell said. "Sir, I can't allow that. You can't stop me. It's my house." Mitchell started walking toward the front door. "Mr. Holder, wait." But Mitchell was already on the porch. The door was unlocked. He turned the handle and stepped inside. The interior was dark, all the lights off. Mitchell's eyes adjusted slowly, making out the familiar furniture of the rental house. Sofa, chairs, the dining table where they'd shared meals over the past 2 weeks. "Winfred," he called out. "I'm here. Alone like you asked." "Mitchell." Punctual as always. The voice came from the living room. Mitchell followed it and found Winfred sitting in an armchair, a laptop open on his lap. The man looked older than his 53 years, his white hair disheveled, his eyes red-rimmed but sharp. In his hand was a device that looked like a modified smartphone. "Where are they?" "Upstairs. Sleeping peacefully, thanks to my sedative gas. They'll wake up in a few hours with headaches, but no permanent damage." Winfred held up the device. "Unless I press this button, in which case they'll breathe in a different compound, one that will cause irreversible neurological damage within minutes." Mitchell forced himself to stay calm. "You said you wanted me to understand loss. Killing them doesn't accomplish that." "No, but watching them become vegetables while you're helpless to stop it, that accomplishes it perfectly." Winfred smiled. "However, I'm a sporting man. I'll give you a choice, Mitchell. You can save one of them, your wife or your daughter. You decide which one gets the antidote and the other doesn't." "You're bluffing. You don't have any antidote." "Don't I?" Winfred pulled out 2 syringes from his jacket, holding them up to catch the dim light. "The compound I'm using is one of my own design, a neurotoxin that mimics the effects of prion disease. Without the antidote, it's fatal within 12 hours. With the antidote, full recovery. But I only made 2 doses, and one is for me, in case of accidental exposure. So you get to choose, Mitchell. Who lives?" Mitchell looked at the syringes, at Winfred's mocking smile, at the device that could kill his family. Then he smiled. "That's a good offer," Mitchell said. "But I have a counter-proposal." Chapter 8, The Reckoning. Winfred's smile faltered. "You're not in a position to negotiate." "Or not." Mitchell pulled out his phone, holding it up so Winfred could see the screen. "You see, while you've been sitting here waiting for me, I've been working. Do you know what I do for a living, Winfred? I find things people want hidden. Money, evidence, connections. And I'm very, very good at it." "What's your point?" "My point is that I know everything about you now. Not just your past crimes, but your present situation. Your finances, for example. You've been living off a cache of cash you accumulated over the years, about $340,000 hidden in various accounts and physical locations. Except you only have access to about $90,000 of that now, because I had the FBI freeze your accounts and seize the cash you stashed in safe deposit boxes. Winfred's expression darkened. Irrelevant. I don't need money where I'm going. No. Then why did you wire $20,000 to a fake passport broker in Mexico 3 days ago? Why are there airline tickets purchased in your current alias for a flight to Cancun tomorrow morning? You're not here for revenge, Winfred. You're here because you're desperate. Your escape plan is falling apart, and you need one last big payday before you disappear. You have no idea. You were planning to blackmail me, Mitchell continued. Make me liquidate my assets, empty my bank accounts, all to save my family. Then you disappear with the money and release the toxin anyway, because that's who you are, someone who destroys things out of petty spite. Winfred stood up, his hand tightening on the device. Very clever. But none of that changes your situation. Your family is still upstairs, still breathing in low doses of my compound, and you still have no way to stop me. Actually, I do. Mitchell pressed a button on his phone. Dave now. Through the window, Mitchell saw his father-in-law appear from the side of the house, moving with surprising speed for his age. He was carrying something, a large canister with a hose attached. What is that? Winfred demanded, moving toward the window. A carbon dioxide fire suppression system, the kind used in server rooms and laboratories. Mitchell smiled. Dave spent 30 years as a butcher, which means he knows all about refrigeration systems, gas pressures, and chemical properties. He's currently pumping pure CO2 into your ventilation system, which will disperse any gas you've released and make the air too oxygen-poor for combustion. Winfred spun back toward Mitchell, his face twisted with rage. You're bluffing. That would kill everyone in the house, including you. Not if we have respirators. Mitchell pulled a compact, breathing mask from his jacket. I had Dave bring 2 more for Christine and Maya. By the time the CO2 reaches dangerous levels, your toxin will be completely neutralized. Then I'll just release a higher dose. With what? Mitchell nodded toward the device in Winfred's hand. That's just a remote trigger for ventilation system dispersal, right? But if the ventilation system is flooded with CO2, your dispersal system won't work. The gas you've prepared is heavier than air. It'll sink and become inert without proper airflow to carry it. Winfred stared at Mitchell, his hand trembling on the device. You can't possibly know that. I'm a pharmaceutical consultant, remember? I've analyzed thousands of chemical compounds, reviewed hundreds of delivery systems. I know how toxins work, Winfred, and I know you're not nearly as smart as you think you are. For a moment, they stood in silence, the air in the house becoming noticeably cooler as CO2 flooded the ventilation system. Mitchell could hear sirens in the distance, the police finally arriving. Then Winfred laughed, a harsh, desperate sound. You magnificent bastard. You actually beat me. Not yet. Mitchell took a step forward. Put down the device and the syringes. It's over. Is it? Winfred's expression changed, becoming calm, almost peaceful. You know, Mitchell, I really did create a neurotoxin, and I really did expose your family to it. But I lied about one thing. There is no antidote. These syringes, he held them up, just saline solution. Your wife and daughter are already dying, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. Mitchell felt his world tilt. You're lying. Am I? Or are you willing to bet your family's lives on that assumption? Winfred pocketed one syringe and held up the other. But you know what? I'm feeling generous. This really is an antidote. One dose enough for one person. So make your choice, Mitchell. Who do you save? Before Mitchell could respond, there was a sound from upstairs, a cough, then movement. Christine appeared at the top of the stairs, wearing one of the respirator masks Dave had provided, with Maya behind her, also masked. Hey, honey, Christine said, her voice muffled by the mask. Dave called and told me put these on. Said something about gas. Mitchell felt relief flood through him, so intense it nearly buckled his knees. They were okay. They were awake and okay. Winfred stared at them, his face going pale. No, that's impossible. The sedative should have kept them unconscious for hours. You mean the sedative? Dave appeared in the doorway behind Winfred, holding a small gas canister. Found it connected to the vents in the basement. Good thing I shut it off before it could do any real damage. Winfred spun around, and Mitchell saw the exact moment the man realized he'd lost. All his planning, all his preparation, all his careful manipulation, undone by a 72-year-old former butcher and a forensic accountant. Put down the syringe, Winfred, Mitchell said quietly. It's over. No. Winfred's hand shook as he held up the syringe. No, I'm not going to prison. I'm not going to rot in a cell while people like you walk free. If I can't win, then nobody wins. He jabbed the syringe into his own neck and pressed the plunger. No. Mitchell lunged forward, but it was too late. Winfred crumpled to the floor, convulsing, foam forming at his mouth. Mitchell grabbed his phone and called 911, shouting for an ambulance, but even as he did, he knew it was futile. Whatever Winfred had injected himself with was fast-acting and lethal. Detective Page burst through the door, his gun drawn, followed by a swarm of police officers. They secured the scene, called for paramedics, but there was nothing to be done. Winfred Krause died on the floor of Mitchell's rental house, a victim of his own poisoned revenge. Chapter 9. The Aftermath. 3 months later, Mitchell stood in his backyard, watching Maya help Christine plant tomatoes in their garden. They'd moved back home after the house had been thoroughly inspected and declared safe. The security system had been upgraded, and Mitchell had installed enough cameras and sensors to monitor a military base. But slowly, life was returning to normal. The forensic analysis of Winfred's compounds had confirmed several things. The sedative gas was real and had been detected in the house's ventilation system, but Dave had indeed shut it off before it could affect anyone. The neurotoxin Winfred had threatened to release was actually a complex cocktail of chemicals that would have caused severe flu-like symptoms, but nothing permanent. More psychological warfare than actual poison. And the syringe Winfred had injected himself with? That had contained a genuine lethal toxin, one he'd apparently kept as his final insurance policy. The medical examiner's report called it one of the most potent synthetic poisons ever encountered. Winfred Krause had killed himself rather than face justice, taking his secrets and his twisted intelligence to the grave. The FBI's investigation into Winfred's files had led to the indictment of dozens of pharmaceutical executives and the shutdown of several fraudulent research operations. Mitchell had been called to testify before Congress, where he'd explained how Winfred's documentation had exposed systemic corruption in the drug approval process. Some media outlets had tried to paint Winfred as a whistleblower, a tragic figure driven to extremes by corporate injustice. But Mitchell made sure everyone knew the truth. Winfred was a serial killer who'd murdered at least 7 people and attempted to kill many more. His whistleblowing was just another attempt to cause chaos and pain. Mitchell, Dave appeared beside him, holding 2 beers. Thought you could use this. Mitchell accepted the bottle gratefully. Thanks. For the beer, and for everything else. You saved your family, not me. We saved them together. If you hadn't figured out that ventilation system, if you hadn't been there as backup. Dave raised his beer. To backup, and to being the kind of paranoid bastards who check for gas leaks. They clinked bottles and drank. What happens now? Dave asked. Back to normal consulting work? Actually, the FBI has been asking me to join their financial crimes unit. Analyzing pharmaceutical fraud, tracking money for drug trafficking operations, that sort of thing. Better pay, better benefits, and I'd be doing something that matters. You be good at it. Maybe. Christine's not sure about me working with law enforcement full-time. Says she's seen enough police activity to last a lifetime. Can't blame her. Dave watched his daughter and granddaughter laughing together. But I'll tell you something, Mitchell. When Winfred gave you that stake, he thought he was targeting a paper pusher who'd crumble under pressure. He had no idea he was up against someone who'd fight like hell to protect his family. You didn't just survive him. You outsmarted him, outmaneuvered him, and beat him at his own game. We beat him, Mitchell corrected. You spotted the poison in the first place. Details. Dave smiled. The point is, you're not just a forensic consultant, Mitchell. You're a hunter, and the world needs more hunters willing to go after predators like Winfred Krauss. Mitchell thought about that while they stood in comfortable silence. He'd spent his career finding hidden truths, exposing fraud, bringing justice through spreadsheets and data analysis. But the past 3 months had shown him something else. He was capable of more than he'd ever imagined. He could plan, adapt, fight when necessary, and do whatever it took to protect the people he loved. Maybe Dave was right. Maybe it was time to use those skills more directly. "Hey, Dad, Mitchell." Christine called from the garden. "Come help us. Maya wants to plant peppers, and I'm vetoing that idea." "Why?" "I like peppers," Maya protested. "Because last year you planted peppers, and we had so many that I was finding them in the freezer until March." Mitchell laughed and headed toward his family, Dave beside him. Behind them, the house stood solid and safe, no longer tainted by the threat that had nearly destroyed them. Winfred Krauss had wanted to teach Mitchell about loss and suffering. Instead, he'd taught Mitchell something far more valuable, that he was capable of protecting his family against any threat, no matter how intelligent or dangerous. And that when pushed to the edge, Mitchell Holder would push back twice as hard. As he reached Christine and Maya, pulling them both into a hug while they laughed and protested, Mitchell made a silent promise. He'd never forget how close he'd come to losing everything. He'd never take his family's safety for granted. And if another predator ever threatened them, he'd be ready. Because he'd learned something important about himself over these past 3 months. He was done being prey. From now on, he was the hunter. Epilogue. 6 months after Winfred's death, a package arrived at Mitchell's new FBI office. Inside was a thumb drive and a handwritten note. "Mitchell Holder, my name is Eddie Gibbs. You don't know me, but I know you. I was one of the 12 names on Winfred Krauss's target list, someone he planned to kill after he was done with you. Thanks to your quick thinking, the FBI contacted me before anything could happen. They've been helping me relocate and start over. But I wanted you to know something. On this drive is information about 3 other people like Winfred, brilliant, vindictive, and completely willing to destroy lives for revenge. I've been researching them for years as part of a personal project. Now I'm passing that research to you because I think you're the only person who can stop them. The world needs someone willing to hunt the hunters. I hope you'll consider it. E.g., Mitchell